Shodanandana Pradjanaranjana Shamana Tiravana Chari Yamuna Tiravana Chari Tiravana Chari Yamuna Tiravana Chari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihara Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihara Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihara. Hari Srimad His Divine Grace Sri Bhakti Vedanta Swami Sri Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Hari. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya. Narayanam Namaskritya. Narayanam Namaskritya. Naram Chaiva Narottamam. Naram Chaiva Narottamam. Devim Saraswatim Vyasam. Devim Saraswatim Vyasam. Tato Jayam Mudirayet. This morning reading from Canto 1, Chapter 15, verse number 10. 1, 15, 10. Patyatavad dhimaka kalpta mahabhisheka. Shlagishta charu kabaram kavitai kativai sabhayam. Shlagishta charu kabaram kavitai sabhayam. Prishtam vikirya padayo patita shrumukya. Prishtam vikirya padayo patita shrumukya. Yastatriyo krita hateshu vimukta kleshaha. Yastatriyo krita hatesha vimukta klesha. I'm sure I have the wrong meter. Patnyastavad maka klipta mahabhisheka. Patnyastavad maka klipta mahabhisheka. Lagdhishta charu kabaram krit Kitivai Sabhayam
Shlagishtacharu Kabaram Katavayam
Prishtam Vikirya Padayo Bhatitashro Mukhya
Srishtam Vikirya Padayo Patitashu Mukhya
Yes. Tat Shri Striyo Krita Hateshu Vimukta Keshaha
Yastat Shriyo Krita Tesha Vimukta Kesha.
Translation, it was he only who loosened the hair of all the wives of the miscreants who dared open the cluster of your queen's hair, which had been nicely dressed and sanctified for the great Rajasuya sacrificial ceremony. At that time, she fell down at the feet of Lord Krishna with tears in her eyes. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Queen Draupadi had a beautiful bunch of hair, which was sanctified in the ceremonial function of Rajasuya Yajna. But when she was lost in a bet, Dushasana touched her glorified hair to insult her. Draupadi then fell down at the lotus feet of Krishna, and Lord Krishna decided that all the wives of Dushasana and company should have their hair loosened as a result of the battle of Kurukshetra. Thus, after the battle of Kurukshetra, all the sons and grandsons of Dhritarashtra died in battle. All the wives of the family were obliged to loosen their hair as widows. In other words, all the wives of the Kuru family became widows because of Dushasana's insulting a great devotee of the Lord. The Lord can tolerate insults upon himself by any miscreant because the Father tolerates even insults from the Son, but he never tolerates insults upon his devotees. By insulting a great soul, one has to forego all the results of pious acts and benedictions also. The Pandavas retired timely. So that's chapter 15. You spoke on this verse on Sunday, the previous verse on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned something in the car ride.
I wrote the article based on this chapter.
You wrote an article based on the chapter. That's right. That's right. Let's go back a few verses. Text 8. Because he was near me, it was possible for me, this is Arjuna, in his reporting back to his elder brother Yudhishthira, what happened when he went to Dwarka. Because he was near me, it was possible for me to conquer with great dexterity the powerful king of heaven, Indradev, along with his demigod associates, and thus enable the fire god to devastate the Kandava forest. And only by his grace was the demon called Maya saved from the blazing Kandava forest, and thus we could build our assembly house of wonderful architectural workmanship, where all the princes assembled during the performance of Rajasuya Yajna and paid you tributes. Your respectable younger brother, who possesses the strength of 10,000 elephants, killed by his grace Jarasandha, whose feet were worshipped by many kings. These kings had been brought for sacrifice in Jarasandha's Mahabhairava Yajna, but they were released. Later, they paid tribute to your majesty. It was he, in this verse, only who loosened the hair of all the wives of the miscreants, who dared open the cluster of your queen's hair, which had been nicely dressed and sanctified for the Rajasuya sacrificial ceremony. At that time, she fell down at the feet of Lord Krishna with tears in her eyes. Several things. I'm meditating on the contemporary society view or modern society view that speaks very badly about violence, and in one sense, rightly so, because too much violence, and left and right, and violence, and people get provoked and they enact violence even without being provoked. So it's adharma. But then there's violence that's dharma. On the one hand, Prabhupada would speak of Gandhi in favorable terms and also critical terms, because Gandhi was a proponent of Bhagavad Gita. He requested, he was encouraging Gandhi to, now that there's liberation, now there's independence from England, you're a celebrity in the world and people will listen to you, so glorify Bhagavad Gita. And he didn't turn his attention, he continued with politics. So he, an exponent or proponent or an advocate of Bhagavad Gita, at the same time, how did he, Prabhupada would certainly speak at length about how did he derive the teaching of nonviolent cooperation from the text of Bhagavad Gita. Because in Bhagavad Gita, the beginning point, Arjuna doesn't want to be nonviolent, and the ending point, he accepts Krishna's wish that he become violent. So teaching nonviolence from Bhagavad Gita it's just convenient. The popularity of Bhagavad Gita deriving from Bhagavad Gita something that's not the teaching of Bhagavad Gita. So, he spoke strongly against that view. He'd say he condemned that view, which was his main platform. I didn't read it, but it is said that Gandhi said, I don't accept that there was a battle of Kurukshetra. I don't accept that Krishna induced Arjuna to fight at the battle of Kurukshetra. There was no such battle, there was no such inducement of Arjuna to fight. And if that's required for me to be a practicing Hindu, then I reject my Hinduism. And then so he went on to teach Bhagavad Gita. So there's violence. There's a just place. There's a just place for everything. There's a proper place for things that are in one sense not to be done, and there's a proper place for those things that are not to be done to be done. Not all things, but most things. So, for example, this one, this violence of, because Dushashana did what Dushashana did, Krishna then condemned Dushashana, not the wives, but they would, as Dushashana had made this offense to Draupadi, the wives of Dushashana and those that were cheering him on would also have to loosen their hair because of the Vedic tradition. When a woman becomes widow, her hair is no longer tied as it was when she was married, as a sign, an external sign she's now a widow. There's other external signs of the cloth that she wears, etc. So violence, and invoked by the Supreme. So that's bad from a modern moral point of view. So modern moral point of view doesn't work. Besides, there's abundant violence. Is there a place for appropriate violence? And the answer is yes. And then comes the next, and that's the offending a Vaishnava. And then comes offending a very exalted Vaishnava or Vaishnavi like Draupadi. And the consequence of offense is severe. And it's not that one should think, well, so-and-so is not an advanced Vaishnava or Vaishnavi, so offense is okay. It's never okay. Never okay, because it's not okay with Krishna. And there's consequence. So the consequence may come by nature's own way. Will come by nature's own way. One may try to take the offense against a Vaishnava in one's own hand, and you'll be the instrument for punishment for someone who's the offender. And that's risky business. It's not that there's never a situation that requires that, but if it's one's position to correct a miscreant by one means or another means, then if it may be appropriate. And if it's not one's position, then one shouldn't take that position of reprimanding a person who has made a transgression of one kind or another kind, including offending a Vaishnava. I mean, there's whole what to do if you're in the presence of someone who is engaged in sadhuninda. Difficult for the ordinary fellow. So one of there's different options that one can exercise, but this one's extreme. It's Krishna's an option Krishna can exercise because of the overall purpose that Krishna appeared to annihilate the miscreants, and certainly Dushashana was one, and Duryodhana was another. And in many ways, not in countless ways, but very severe ways. And so they met their demise because of that offense. There are many nice instructions in scripture, like the the Avaduta Brahmin, for example, that when people were mistreating him, he took no action. Understanding that the perpetrators of this offense, they're under the grip of the laws of nature, they'll be dealt with for that. I don't have to do something. And many other scriptural examples. So if supposing one's on the receiving end of some offense, or supposing you're the witness of someone who's on the receiving end of some offense, what are options? Ultimately, the personality of Godhead is displeased by such behavior. And then there's different courses of action one can take, knowing that fact. The Supreme Lord is displeased by such behavior. And then it depends on the degree of severity of that behavior. In this case, Draupadi. And the reaction that went to Dushasana and his buddies who were also sneering and thinking this was really nice, what he was doing, and making no effort to stop, that those persons are equally culpable or also culpable. And there's consequence. There's consequence for offense. And then the degree of the offense and the degree of culpability. Ultimately, that's in Krishna's hand, and it's not a wise position to assume I'm the instrument of Krishna's will, that someone that's culpable is to receive punishment from Krishna, and I'm the instrument. Whack. It's presumptuous. There may be circumstances, but then when there are such circumstances, it's not out of my own mental concoction, nor my own anger or resentment that somebody is misbehaving or criticizing another. And so to act as representative of Krishna, it's a very significant position, and requires a qualified person to take that position. So back to the chapter, the context of what's going on. Krishna has departed. Arjuna was sent to Dwaraka because there was this premonition Krishna is going to depart. So Arjuna was sent by Yudhisthira and the other brothers. Go find out what's going on over there in Dwaraka. And Krishna and Arjuna found out. And Arjuna was devastated, naturally. But he also had his duty, and the duty was to come back and report to his elder brother, who he revered, and his other brothers. And then they made a decision after Krishna's departure. Pandavas retire timely. That's the chapter. There's a very nice section in Mahabharata that gives some of the details of their journey in the North Country. When we visited Haridwar and Badrinath, we heard some of those histories. Some very nice histories. And they were way up. Way up in the mountains. But that detail isn't in Srimad Bhagavatam, it's in Mahabharata. But the retire timely principle, in the sense, and what the Bhagavatam is doing, in essence, is revealing Bhagavan. And one who hears the narrations revealing Bhagavan, then such an audience or receiver of this sound vibration has the opportunity by hearing to purification and to gradually more deeply understand Bhagavan as described in that within that sound vibration. And any audience, just by hearing and hearing and hearing again, then affinity for Bhagavan and some clarity. Who is the Supreme? And it's kind of comical or sad. And when different people have different ideas about the Supreme, philosophical, religious, cultural, and the range of the concepts is very broad. There's some general principles, common principles, but then there's some very strange ones also. But rather, so the Bhagavatam makes the sky clear. There's no unclarity of the personality of Godhead and being revealed in the pages of the sound vibration of Srimad Bhagavatam. And the consequence, the heart becomes cleansed. It says in the beginning, the chapter 2, Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevayam Bhagavati Uttama Shloktir Bhaktir Bhavati. The desire to be engaged in service to Krishna arises, Bhaktir Bhavati. And the modes of nature subside and are cleansed away. Even hearing about violence, in this particular verse, understanding what happened to Draupadi in that public assembly, Krishna became violent. He cursed Dushasana. And by his cursing, then the sequence of events happened where, in fact, all Dushasana and all the wives of all the Kauravas underwent this hair loosening procedure, the loss of their husbands. And why the loss of their husbands? Because of the being opposed to Krishna. They all lost their lives. When there was attempt after attempt after attempt after attempt to not have a battle and have a peaceful settlement. The drama is very vivid, very moving. Okay. See if there's some discussion.
Yes.
Congratulations, you get figured out how all this works.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. So my question is regarding this statement. So Lord Krishna decided that all the wives of Dushasana and company should have their hair loosened as a result of the battle of Kurukshetra. So I want to understand the mentality of the wives. Were they actually like in support of their husband's act? Like, were they against the will of Krishna, or they were innocent bystanders? And were they physically present during this act of disrobing? Because I'm a bit to me it seems like they're
victims.
Suffering, like victims unnecessarily, because it's their husbands that decided to do their the misdeed, and the wives in their position have like no power to stop that.
We don't have an answer. I don't have the answer to that question. But implied is they were loyal to their husbands. Whether they were like Dushasana, wanting to see Draupadi stripped naked, not likely. But they weren't, pristine either. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had that adversity come to them. The adversity wasn't the same as went to their husbands, but they were in alignment with their husbands. Not necessarily that particular act, but the wickedness of their husbands, because they're all in cahoots. So they're implicated. Quite in contrast, for example, as the wives of the Kaliya serpent. They were faithful to their husband. At the same time, they weren't vicious and inimical like he was. And that was shown by their prayers. And then the consequence of what happened to them was different as well. Kaliya wasn't killed. He was punished. There's justice in the universe, in other words. Anything else? Yeah.
Hi, Krishna Guru Maharaj. My question is about if someone's offensive towards you.
Is someone offensive to whom?
Towards you, and it's not premeditated, it just happened. What should you do in that situation?
Depends. Depends on the person, depends on the circumstance, depends on the relationship. Depends. If it's something that's repeated, that's another circumstance. But if it's a one-off, something unintentional, whatever, then you make light of it. You may not. You may bring it to the attention of that person in a certain mood that's not a confrontational mood. But excuse me, but you're standing on my foot. It hurts. So, I didn't. It wasn't intentional. I'm very sorry. So, depends on the circumstance. Something else? Okay. Yes, you have something?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. It's more of a technical question. In the larger context of this chapter, Arjuna expresses a lot of feelings of separation.
Yes.
From Krishna departing. Recently, at least in Portland, we have heard about the different feelings of separation from Ujjvala Nilamani. In the context of Madhurya Rasa, like Purvara, Man, Prema Vaichitya, Pravas. Does this fall, like, I know the rasa that Arjuna is in is different, but is there a correlation, or does Arjuna's feeling of separation fall into one of these buckets?
I don't have the answer to that. Quite possibly, because that's the next question. If so, which one? I'm not equipped to answer that question. I've not read anything on this particular point, so I can't say. That his relationship with Krishna is well known, and he's experiencing feelings that are very intense. So likely there's some particular terminology that fits the situation. But I can't think of it. I've not read it. I can't think of it. If you want, you can do some research and see if you can find. Since you like this chapter. You wrote something about it. Okay.
Thank you.
Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.